Sleep, sleep, even when I'm walking in my sleep. On the corner, I used to think that's all we'd ever be. Come home to California. Hey, wild I'd give up everything.
I'm a member of several different bands. I'm a musician, songwriter, and entertainer. I was diagnosed at the age of 22 in New York City while I was on tour with my band Jack's Mannequin. I'm now 34 years old and proud to say 12 years a cancer survivor. Music was a huge part of my walk through cancer treatment. I had actually recorded an album in the time leading up to the diagnosis that I received of ALL. And I was finishing the record when I found out I was sick. So there was a huge motivation within me to get this music heard and to have it be heard while I was still alive, and hopefully get to the point where I'd be able to travel and tour and play that music for people. Other than that, I was like a playlist junkie when I was in treatment. I had all these different mixes that I used for various different moments in my treatment. So I had my radiation mix, and I had my chemo mix, and I had my I've got to get to sleep and stay asleep and be rested mix. I think I remember the first day that I was actually like in the hospital officially, and I put on Bob Marley. And I remember I had this moment where I'm not sure why, but I was like I just chose to be overjoyed, and I listened to like all of Bob Marley's Legend album, like, and danced in my hospital room. And I think music played a big part in me being able to cope with my treatment and my recovery. The inspiration for me to start a foundation, which was the Dear Jack Foundation, was truthfully my fans and the people who had rallied around me while I was sick. As a lot of you know who are survivors and who are family and friends of survivors or treat patients, you know that there's this world that just kind of comes around you and helps you get through it if you're lucky. And I was really lucky in that respect. And I had all these fans who were, I had like an in lieu of flowers, please give money to the Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation. That was sort of my go-to, instead of like, I knew that fans would be trying to send me tons and tons of stuff, which I was like not even allowed to have things in my room because I was so neutropenic that, you could bring something in there and it would just, and it would wipe you out. So all of a sudden there was this insane flux of donations to this charity that we had deemed as sort of an in lieu of flowers scenario. And I think a couple of people around me said, like, why don't you take this and use this money towards causes that you believe and that will help people who are affected in a similar way to you. And that's what led me to adolescent and young adult cancer, realizing how underserved this population is. And knowing that my peers, some of them were being treated in pediatric facilities where on top of seeing, dealing with whatever the horror of your treatment was, you were seeing little kids going through this, which is, I think, that's got to be a challenge for somebody in their 20s to also be shouldering the burden of watching young people go through this. Me, I was treated around people in their 70s and their 80s and felt no sense of community whatsoever. And so I started pretty early trying to say, like, is there anything that we can do for this demographic? And early on, people would say no. There are no charities that do this. There are no research grants for this this sort of demographic of cancer patients, and that's what galvanized me towards charitable work on behalf of AYAs. Well, as most young adult cancer patients know, you are living a life while you're in treatment. And I think for a lot of young people, like, that life is just starting. I was 22. I I had been in the middle of a breakup right before I got sick and was sort of just piecing that whole thing back together with the woman who became my wife. But, getting back together in a hospital room in your 20s when everybody else is like out at bars and finishing college and starting their careers. And, and for me, I was just starting this whole second wave of my career in a business that frankly rewards fearlessness and rewards that sort of youthful mindset. And all of a sudden now I'm like this guy carrying around this like burden of like, I'm a cancer survivor. Like, how do I sing songs? How do I sing songs that are relevant when who knows what this is like? And I think that's a common thread for a lot of young people. It's like your life is interrupted at a time that the people around you can't relate to it, and it scares a lot of people away. And that was a journey for me. It was a journey in treatment, and it was certainly a journey in survivorship. The two most immediately reflective of that experience came on the record that I wrote sort of in the direct aftermath of being sick. There's a song called Swim and a song called The Resolution. One sort of being the defiant side of being a survivor, which is, for me at the time as a public figure, I had gotten so tired of my identity being so wrapped up in my survivorship and what I had gone through. It was, at a time where I was so excited to like be through my cancer. I felt like when it came to interacting with journalists and people who were interested in my music, that was all they wanted to talk to me about. Now, in retrospect, I totally understand it, but as a new survivor, sometimes the last thing you want to do is get back inside of that headspace. So there's a song called The Resolution, and the lyric is, I'm alive and I don't need a witness to know that I survived. And it was kind of like my FU to the world at the time, because I didn't want to talk about it that much. It's sort of polar opposite is a song called Swim, which, a lot of people think it's about being sick. And for me, it was about feeling sick even though I wasn't anymore, and it was about I think the emotional toll that survivorship takes on a person. And, I try to be delicate when I talk about this because I'm so blessed to have survived, but I think it's not reflected on enough how hard survivorship really can be for young people. And Swim to me was a moment where I was battling a decent amount of depression and feeling guilty about that depression because I was so blessed to still be here. And I think that lyric for me sums up in a lot of ways what it was like to be a young survivor, and trying to find hope in that and realizing that there is something beautiful past that moment. And that's what that song means to me.
I keep going back there to the crowded street where I could see you walking in my sleep. And I'll never stop trying. You're my silver lining, even when I'm walking in my sleep. In my sleep, even when I'm walking in my sleep.
Now, like, I have this beautiful daughter, and she, I think for me, was the thing that after all the work, after all the therapy and reconciling a lot of it, I think it was really her that I finally made peace with everything, and I just was like, okay, like, this is why this all happened. And if it's not why it all happened, I could finally look back and say, thank you, cancer, you gave me something amazing.
What you